Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome back to strategic management courses. Actually, in the previous videos we have defined the strategic management. We went throughout the process of strategic management. We developed the models and we examined the tools that we might need in strategic management. So you can find those videos in my channel, Ecoman Courses, also here below the links. So actually here in this video I'll try to give a snapshot of strategic management, a summary to strategic management topic. So we're going to overview different aspects of strategic management. Basically, why strategic management is interesting. Why is it really interesting? Basically, strategic management is highly needed in all organizations, and it has been proven a direct linkage between those companies that they put in place a strategic planning process and their performance. So those with a strategic management model, they perform well. And also it is very important for consultant. They have to have this the theory and the practice of strategic management. So let's get started here with you, Professor Azla Arab Saudi. So we start with the definition of strategic management. In a nutshell, strategic management can be defined as the art and the science of formulating, implementing, and evaluating cross-functional decisions that enable an organization to achieve its objectives. Strategic management is a continuous process of strategic analysis, strategy creation, implementation, and monitoring used by organizations with the purpose to achieve and maintain or sustain a competitive advantage. So here, one of the keywords of strategic management is the competitiveness, or to gain and sustain a competitive advantage. Basically, we must ask some questions at first. So where the organization is at the moment, where does it want to go, and how it will get there. So where the organization is at the moment, we can formulate it differently. We can ask, for example, what the organization is actually doing, and it refers to the mission statement. Where does it want to go, what we want to become, what is the direction, etc., where we want to sail, is about the vision statement of the company and how it will get there, about the resources, the practice of strategic management, the tools, the models, the etc., the capabilities and practicalities of strategic management. So strategic management process, in a nutshell, is about 5 steps: initial assessment, situation analysis, strategy formulation, implementation, and strategy formulation, monitoring, at the end. We're going to see in details what is in each of those steps, and also what questions we have and we must ask at different levels and at different steps of this process. This process, of course, could be adapted to organizations, because organizations are different each other. They have different layout, different people, different processes, different procedures, different sector, different activity, different core competence, the core business, the risk approaches, etc. So they are different, with different configurations and layout, culture, and so. So we have basically different models, but we're going to develop in this video only 3: David's model, Rothermel model, and Thomson and Martin model. For David's model, as you see, this model starts with developing vision and mission statement. Then we scan the environment externally and internally, and then we establish long-term objectives and goals, and we generate, evaluate, and choose the strategies. We make choices, and we implement strategy or strategies, and eventually we measure and evaluate the performance of the organization. The 4 first steps are about formulation, and then implementation, evaluation, which is the process of strategic management. So we can summarize in 3 points: formulation, implementation, and finally evaluation. So as you see, this an adaptation. We adapt the model to this approach of David's. And as you see here, the arrows also, it means that we can come back, correct, and so on. So without getting into too much details, I'll go to Brutamer's model. So Brutamer models, as you see, is a circle. It's a loop. So it starts with initial analysis, then external and internal analysis. Then we formulate business strategy and formulate corporate strategy and implement the strategy, and we come back to the first step, which is initial analysis. So as you see here, the difference about the formulation. In this formulation, it is divided, split into two, business strategy and corporate strategy. We start with business strategy, I mean at the market level, and then the corporates at the portfolio and I mean at the corporate level. So as you see here, it's kind of it lacks the evaluation, but we maybe we include in gaining and sustaining competitive advantage, because here the heart of this model. Then we have the Thomson and Martins model. This Thomson and Martins model is practical, and it starts where are we now? So with an appraisal of the situation, we review the corporate objectives, and at the same time we develop the situation analysis or assessment. For instance, with the SWOT analysis, SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Then we clarify the objectives, and here is also another difference between Thomson-Martins model and Brutamer. I mean the previous one. The previous one, it starts with business at market level, then we go to corporate level. Here we start with corporate level, corporate strategy, and it makes sense. So as you see here, because we started by corporate objectives, so we develop here corporate strategy first, then competitiveness or competitive strategies, and we develop strategic decisions, and then we look to implement the strategy, and eventually we monitor the progress, or we evaluate or appraise the progress. So how are we getting there for decisions and implementation, and then how are we doing, I mean how we are progressing. For strategic management model, okay, the process, as you've seen, as we evoke a different model, but also there are a model that summarizes all. So all in all, a strategic management model, or if we want to explore this strategy, for example, the book of Exploring Corporate Strategy of Gary Johnson and Whittington, they developed this model with strategic position, strategic choices, and strategy in action or into action. So here, strategic position, it embraces 4 points: the purpose, the environments, the capabilities, and culture. We're going to see what kind of questions we might ask at each of those levels. And then here you have strategic choices for the levels of the strategy. Here, I mean levels of the strategy. Are we going to go international? Are we, for example, what kind of modes of entry? Acquisition, mergers, alliances, partnerships, what kind of contract licenses for indirect investments, and so forth. Then also innovation. And you see, for example, the levels at business and corporate level. And strategy in action is about enacting the strategy. It embraces the 2 last steps of the process, implementation and evaluation. So implementation, of course, in any development of a strategy, we might face a lot of issues, roadblocks that we have to overcome. For example, when we put in place a strategy, we might face resistance to change, and we might use then change management models, for example, of quota, of curtailing, whatever. Okay? Then we have also to develop the practice of strategic management, and then also organizing, because organization, for example, here we talk about reorganization or re-engineering, and finally we evaluate. We can use, for example, the balanced scorecard. So strategic position is concerned with the impact on strategy of the external environment, the organization's strategic capabilities, resources and competences, the organization's goals, and the organization's culture, right? So environment, for example, macro level, meso, industrial, etc. And capabilities, the value chain, how we are organized internally, what are our resources. So we can use, for example, the RBV, which stands for resources-based view, value, and so on. and then also the purpose and scope, the purpose for vision mission statement. Fundamental questions for strategic position: what are the environmental opportunities and threats? What are the organization strengths and weaknesses? And what is the basic purpose of the organization, and how does culture shape strategy? So without getting into the detail or into this debate between is the culture shaping strategy or the opposite, the strategy is shaping the culture. Anyway, we need, to adapt the culture to the new strategy. How to analyze an organization's position in the external environment, how to analyze the determinants and factors of strategic capability, resources, competences, and the linkage between them. We can use a SWOT as a funnel or TOS matrix. So how to understand also an organization's purposes, taking into account corporate governance, we're going to take the responsibilities, how we can help people accountable for what, etc., and the charts, the ethics charts, etc., stakeholder expectations and business ethics, how to address the role of history and culture in determining an organization's position. For strategic choice, the second level of the model, strategic choices involve the options for strategy in terms of both the directions in which a strategy might move and the methods by which a strategy might be pursued. Basically, we can ask such questions such as how should business units compete, which business to include in the strategic portfolio, where should the organization compete internationally, is the organization innovating appropriately, what kind of innovation exploit or explore, should the organization buy other companies, form alliances, or go it alone. So business strategy, it's the same as competitive strategy. We have to determine if we are going to be cost killers, cost reduction and price reduction, which refers to this cost leadership strategy, or differentiation. This is another level of the strategy. We can enhance, for example, the quality, or improve the distribution channels, or improve our negotiation with the different stakeholders, especially, for example, the suppliers. So how should we compete? Corporate strategy for diversification, which businesses to include in the portfolio, degree of diversification, the spread of products, line of products, and markets. International strategy for internationalization. So are we going to export? What kind of modes of entry, licensing, foreign direct investments, FDIs, acquisitions or mergers. Also innovation strategy, innovate or survive. What kind of innovation, what typologies of the innovation, radical, incremental, technological for the technology breakthrough, or incremental, right? Or architectural as well. So mergers and acquisitions and alliances, are we going to grow organically, with own resources, or throughout forms of mergers and partnerships, with other organizations? Strategy in action is about how strategies are formed and how they are implemented. Here the emphasis is put on the practicalities of managing, the practice of strategy. So structuring an organization to support successful performance. Systems as well are required to control the way in which strategy is implemented. And managing strategic change, how should we change? How should the change be led? Fundamental questions at this level for strategy into action, to enact the strategy, which strategies are suitable, acceptable, or infeasible. We're going to come back to this later. What kind of strategy making process is needed? What are the required organization structures and systems? And how should the organization manage necessary changes? And who should do what in the strategy process? That's all. Thank you for watching.